Well, good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Today is Financial Friday, so welcome, everyone. I know we have a couple of call-in, phone-in listeners, so if you're one of them, we will be recording this webinar, and you can view it on events.bbcommunity.org to get the slides. You can also sign up for additional webinars. We're holding these every day, Monday through Friday, and there's a variety of topics just to help businesses navigate their business during this time. You can also view all of the pre-recorded or post-recorded webinars on that page as well. So it's events.bbcommunity.org. My name is Faustine Chan. I'm the Business Innovation Manager for BB Serving Pacific Southwest, and I'm helping organize these daily webinars. So if you do have any questions, please just send them to me at the end if you have questions about any of our webinars and retrieving any of the information that we shared with you today. So we have two great speakers today. We have George Eiskamp and Jessie Kaffai from Camino Alliance. They both are battle-tested entrepreneurs who have managed through numerous crises from the past 5 years, including a 75% price crash, a historic industry depression, the unexpected passing of a key person co-founder, and industry disruption. They're pragmatic, solution-oriented executives who provide a complementary mix of strategic planning and hands-on execution related to business development, marketing, thought leadership, HR, organizational development, and product development. So I'll go ahead and hand it to both of you.
Thank you, Faustine, and thank you to the Better Business Bureau for inviting us to join today's Financial Friday webinar. First, I'd just like to say I hope that you and all your families are doing as well as possible, given the tough times that we're experiencing these days. And we're hoping that each of you walk away with one or two big ideas or action items that will help your company survive, cut costs in a way that will set you up to come back stronger than before, or even lay the foundation to transform your companies. Faustine mentioned that Jessie and I have managed through numerous crises at Groundmetrics, which is a sensor tech company. I'll mention Harry. I think he's on the call as well and will be available for Q&A. He's an entrepreneur journalist who has researched and written extensively on entrepreneurship and innovation, including for entrepreneur.com, the Huffington Post, and other household name publications. Groundmetrics is in the oil and gas industry, and oil is the most volatile commodity in the world. So the cyclicality there is fierce. People in that industry, in fact, wear badges of honor representing how many downturns they've survived. So going through these ups and downs is more commonplace in this space. And outside of oil and gas and commodities industries, most companies haven't seen a crisis since the 08 Great Depression. Business, the workforce, and probably even your company has changed a lot since then. In the past 5 years, at Groundmetrics, we've managed through those crises that Faustine mentioned. And through all this, we learned how to quickly reduce costs big time. We learned how to preserve dignity for everybody involved in reductions, while also building lasting relationships with the people that continued on at Groundmetrics, and including with people that we had to part ways with, and all of this in the midst of adversity. We even learned how to build strength during these slowdowns, so we could emerge out of the down cycles stronger than we were going into them. We're not an HR group or a traditional consultancy. We're just hands-on operational executives and entrepreneurs that are trying to take what we've learned in a very cyclical industry and help out other companies and business leaders that are trying to fight our ways through this crisis that we're all in now. Many of you are entrepreneurs and entrepreneurially minded yourselves. So just remember, I highly encourage you not to let this crisis shut down that part of your brain. We're going to discuss the benefits of engaging your entrepreneur mind and even other entrepreneurs. We'll also touch on various ways to reduce costs as a step towards strengthening your business. There's a lot of different ways costs can be made, and if you think about beginning with the end in mind, if you can conceptualize a stronger company, maybe a transformed company on the other side, then you can make reductions now to put you in a position to grow in that direction as you come out of it. And a lot of this presentation is centered around that. And this will include everything from a cost-cutting litmus test to reducing payroll respectfully to launching new products or services. And you may be thinking, why are we focused on an entrepreneur's perspective? Well, as you probably know, or maybe even remember yourselves, entrepreneurs are constantly working towards a big upside opportunity while trying not to go out of business. When we first get started, we have little capital, a rough prototype or services idea at best, and no customers. Once we get a little further along, we're constantly trying to grow fast with a short runway. Those conditions are filled with uncertainty that carry big risk. One misstep can put a startup out of business. Even if we do everything right, something else could easily put a startup out of business. So even though your companies are further along now and the circumstances are a bit different than when you were just starting them, this is an opportunity to go back and look at the world again like you were when you were first forming your company. And there's an opportunity to flip the script a little bit here. Entrepreneurs are usually seeking assistance from experts in the space we're entering. So here, we encourage you to consider finding entrepreneurs to talk to brainstorm with, to help get their perspective. Even if you're an entrepreneur and even if you're thinking this way, another entrepreneur could bring a different perspective, right? Because they're not immersed in your business. So it might be a bit of a fresh perspective. It might just be looking or thinking about different things. I regularly sanity check ideas, brainstorm, and process issues with a group of entrepreneur friends. In fact, we meet monthly. Even if we don't have something specific that we're working on, we just meet regularly because often conversationally things will just come up that will catch somebody else's attention, that will open a topic worth diving into more deeply. So, we won't go on too much more here about thinking like an entrepreneur, but just, keep that in mind. Let's not have that part of the brain shut down. And now let's take a look at the first things to consider when looking for cost reductions. So we're a few weeks into this crisis, and most of you have probably already addressed, if not all of you, have probably already addressed the most urgent issues that need to be handled. And so this may be a good time to reassess the magnitude of your cost reductions. Take a step back. Nobody knows how this is going to turn out, and each business is going to be impacted differently. So there's no one-size-fits-all solution. Since none of us can understand the situation with full confidence, we're suggesting that you take a 2X approach. Think about what's your best guess of how this is going to go for your business, and then consider what you would do if it was actually 2 times worse than that, or if it lasted twice as long as you expect. Or if it goes as expected, and then 2 or 3 months from now, we're right back in this again in the fall, right? So think about that 2X scenario. And then to the extent possible, move forward with that scenario in mind. Now, I realize that if you do a 2x scenario, what would you do? Maybe the answer is close down the business. Well, and that's probably not a good solution, right? So, but just think at that extreme, because it may cause you to go deeper or do things a little bit differently that could make the difference in saving your company. You've probably already made some big cuts. So now we'll just go through the cost-cutting litmus test. It's a pretty simple mental exercise. We'll go through it, and really you can see this as an opportunity to figure out if you can go even deeper than you already went. So number one, is the asset really critical to move the business forward? This means, can you do substantial business in some way without some purchase that you're considering making? Could it be reacquired when the stability returns? Many things will be much less expensive later. There's going to be companies discounting. There's going to be used products available. There's going to be a lot of opportunities to purchase things on better deals later than maybe what's being looked at right now. This might be an opportunity to save money, upgrade, improve, or even facilitate a pivot on the other side. Number two, freeze all non-critical purchases. If you haven't already done this, then we suggest you require an extra level of approval to ensure critical is not misunderstood or misinterpreted amongst the people that have any sort of purchase authority within your companies. Communicate with all of them to ensure that you're all on the same page. Don't just send out an email, don't just talk to them, but have a conversation with them. What you really want to do is hear them put things in their own words so that you can really understand that you're both aligned in terms of what's critical or what's not critical. If you're a small enough company, you could move to just having all approvals go to you. You can encourage people to double check with their supervisors or a level higher if they're not 100% sure. And I even let them know that this is an instance where it's better to ask for permission in advance to make purchases than to ask for forgiveness later. So if you have any doubt at all, run it up the flagpole and just be sure. Number three here is a few other quick questions to ask yourself. Will you actually lose a key customer if some purchase or expense isn't executed? Will you lose a key sale now or in the very near future? Does this create a unique opportunity to build strength? And if the answer is no to all these questions, then hold off. Don't make the purchase. Stop the bleeding first and then start planning to build strength. Don't just wait and see. We really need to be reducing costs significantly now. Even if there's a cancellation fee involved or some sort of penalties or you're going to lose a deposit, those sort of costs now might be better than following through with whatever purchase you were committed to. And heck, maybe you could even go back to the vendor and convert part of that into a credit towards a future purchase. So maybe you wouldn't have to lose it all. So that's a good litmus test for sort of bigger ticket items. Now let's get into some of the smaller stuff. Even small stuff, especially if it's recurring costs, matter because they are cumulative. This means the sooner you cut or pause them, the more benefit you'll get. If it's a monthly expense, you get a lot more if you cut it on the first month rather than 3 to 6 months later, a lot more savings. So this is a good place to be brutally frugal. Don't leave anything out. Have accounting provide you a list of monthly bills. What subscriptions, licenses, auto payments, and perks can you cancel or pause now? I wouldn't just look at 1 month's bills because some months are quarterly or semi-annually or annually. So I would look at least the past 3 months of bills, and I would ask accounting to even maybe go back 6 months and take out the redundancies for me and just show me, if you look at all 6 months, what were all the costs. It's a bit tedious, but you could probably come up with some meaningful reductions that could be made if you go through that exercise. Not only can all of this add up cumulatively, collectively, and over multiple months, but keeping nice to haves or non-essentials will be seen by some people as disrespectful to those you let go, if you have had a layoff or if you're planning on having a layoff. This sort of perception does not strengthen culture. So even if it's not going to make a big difference financially now, these things may still be worth cutting because of the perception and the signal that it's sending to your team. Now, especially based on everything I just said, this may come across as being counterintuitive or maybe I'm contradicting myself here a little bit, but at the same time we want to cut deeply, we also don't want to be penny wise and pound foolish. Be smart about what you're doing. Where applicable, hire professionals. Sometimes you can be smart and frugal. For example, there's some companies who, what they do as their business is they go into other companies and they look for cost-saving opportunities for those other companies, non-payroll stuff. So they leave payroll alone, but they look at everything else. And they're only, some of them bill such that they're only compensated if they save you costs, and you're in control of what cuts you make or not. And then the way they're compensating is by sharing in some percentage of the costs that they inspire you to save. So there's a lot of companies out there that do this. I do know a firm that has a good reputation. I'd be happy to make a recommendation. If anybody's interested, just contact me later. We all know cash is king. If you have inventory, you also know inventory is cash. Often, a company has more cash tied up in inventory, if it's a product sales company, than in any other category. So it's a big time source of cash. And if you're not turning it over, it's just sitting there losing money for you, essentially. It's not doing anyone any good just sitting in a warehouse. So we suggest you find creative ways to sell it. You should have some sort of inventory segmentation system, such as an ABC analysis. If not, this is a great time to put one in place. Basically, what the ABC analysis does is it's a system that helps you identify what products are contributing the most heavily to your overall profit without eating up too much of your resources. And depending on the dynamics of your businesses, there's a lot of different ways it can be broken down, but it's taken into consideration things like lead times, costs, profit margins, turnover rates, and synergy with other products or services that you offer. So it's a way that you categorically prioritize your inventory. If you do have inventory, there's a good chance that you have a lot in some of the lower tier stock items. So you can put a plan in place to sell it fast and discount as necessary to do so. Don't get hung up on the margins. If you need the cash, then selling it at cost even may be a great deal because it's not liquid sitting in your warehouse. So if you just get your money back, if you need the cash, then selling at cost is probably good money If you're already at some level of desperation for cash, then selling it at half of your cost might make sense, or something below cost. Mathematically, it would be losing money, but putting cash in the bank seems like a winning idea, a winning move right now if you're in trouble, or anticipate being in trouble soon. And assume that if you're waiting and thinking, okay, well, I might fire sale inventory later, but I want to hold off, not do it right now, just remember it's not going to sell overnight. So if you are going to hold off on it, then just don't cut it too close from a timing perspective. Give yourself some time to roll it out, and know you might have to do some trial and error before you figure out a way to effectively sell it off. Again, here, think like an entrepreneur. Inventory sell-offs can be creative and can also generate intrinsic value. Does it make sense for you to offer a certain amount of inventory or certain items to your employees, key customers, or even a key prospective customer first? Alternatively, can you bundle it with higher tier items to sell them as well? For example, buy higher tier item, some higher tier item at maybe a good price for you, right? And then you get the lower tier item for free. You know, a garment company I worked with here about a year ago got into a cash crunch where they were at risk of going out of business, and they had a lot of inventory. And so what they did is they put together a strategic 2-for-1 sale. So they took one of their, or multiple of their very well-selling tops, and they said, if you buy one of these tops for free, you get one of these other tops. And the other tops were their low-selling tops. And this combined with another discount campaign that they put together completely got them out of trouble. It saved their company. Simply by creatively selling off their inventory, they brought in enough cash to be able to pay their expenses and not have to go into bankruptcy. This also had them realize that they needed to do things better than they had been from a stocking and inventory perspective. This sell-off freed up a lot of warehouse space, and so going forward, they restocked fewer SKUs and they managed purchasing better. And these things improved their margins going forward and reduced how much cash they had tied up in inventory, which allowed them to put that towards other valuable areas of the business. And they came out of that cash crunch stronger than they had prior to it because they made systemic improvements to their business. Other alternatives to consider would be giving away some inventory to a good cause. It might be meaningful to you or your team. Might create goodwill within your business's ecosystem. And you always can, and you always should ask your employees for creative ideas. Good employees want to be engaged and they want to contribute. Give them an opportunity to help. Not only is it good for them, but lots of times they'll come up with the best ideas. Right? And you guys probably have many examples of this where they've done that when you've taken a step back and given them the opportunity to contribute. Maybe you're not selling inventory that would make sense to give away or have a strategic sell-off, and maybe it's durable equipment. And if you have durable equipment and it's not selling, are there other ways you can use it strategically? For example, can you loan some of your equipment to highly desirable prospects? Maybe those 1 or 2 customers you've coveted for years and you just haven't been able to break into. Can you loan the equipment to help in the crisis somehow? Can you loan it to help companies that are struggling because of the crisis, even if it's not directly related to the coronavirus? If you loan out some of this equipment, you can always sell it used later, or possibly even give it to a charitable cause. 2021, your profits are probably going to look a lot better than this year. So if you loan it out, bring it back in, use it, rent it out or whatnot, you might have an opportunity to have a good tax deduction if you donated it next year. And this would create an opportunity to generate goodwill in your ecosystem, good press about your organization now, and then again later, if, for example, you gave it away charitably. And again, this might be a good place to tap your employees, to get them involved.
All right, so thanks for that, George. I'll go ahead and take it from here for a little bit, and wanted to just kind of talk today about layoffs and payroll reductions. They are often the first things that business leaders look at and consider when needing to cut costs, and they are typically also one of the most painful processes. So we wanted to just talk today a little bit about the how to cut it, and then saving relationships when you're doing that cut. And what we've found to be true is that a series of layoffs is much more damaging to productivity and company morale than just one deep cut. So for that reason, we recommend taking swift action with the real true intention of it being a one-time event. When you do it, when you can do it that way and when you nail it, you come out stronger on the other side with stronger relationships and better morale than you had before. So the big question is how. So first step is to really determine how much to cut. And George talked a little bit at the beginning, imagining the scenario that is twice as bad and lasts twice as long as you think. So start with that in mind and plan for that 2x scenario and know that you need to cut deep. Since we know that one big reduction is much better than a small string of reductions, you're going to cut deep. And that can sound really daunting, especially because your team is likely busy. So let's just talk a little bit through the risks of going deep. You've got to consider those risks. One risk might be that you've got a delay in the delivery of your goods and services. It slows things down. But the silver lining with that is that if the crisis is industry-wide, or in our case right now, worldwide, everybody is going to be experiencing various delays, and those delays are going to be more acceptable and more forgiven by your customers. So that reduces the risk. Another risk that you're going to want to really consider is losing key people. I think, most people would agree that our people are our most critical assets, and they're very, very critical to our success. But payroll is, often our biggest recurring expense, and so we've got to reduce it big time. So we need to be sure to reduce payroll costs creatively, and at the same time focus it, like we've been saying, on building relationships and preserving morale. We'll talk a little bit more about how to do that in a way to build trust here in a minute. But for the purposes of this section, just remember to communicate that you're doing one big cut to those employees that remain, and let them know that you've cut extra deep to avoid future layoffs. And this will help them worry a lot less about being next, and will help mitigate that risk of losing key people. And, while you can't guarantee that there won't be future layoffs, because nobody knows how bad this is going to get, you can still and should still explain fully that you believe that this reduction will be enough to tip the balance. But you got to be honest with yourself. This cut really does need to be deep enough and big enough to tip the balance. You've got to realize that just freezing hiring, freezing pay raises isn't going to get you far enough in a scenario like this. Your customers are going to be freezing their spending for months to come, and you've already imagined that 2x scenario, so you've got to go deep. So you've got to go deep. and you know the cut needs to be big, but then you've got to figure out how to do it. And the first thing to consider in the how is really considering culture. So we define culture as the aggregate of a person's natural tendencies, reinforced or multiplied by group dynamics, the workplace environment, communications, and leadership role modeling. And so with that definition in mind, it's really clear that the fastest way to change culture in your organization is by replacing people that don't inherently embody your core values. And this, a big layoff that includes counterculture people who are then later, later down the road when we're in the recovery, are replaced by people who inherently already have your core values. That can really supercharge your company. So if you have a culture problem, or if your culture isn't consistent throughout the organization, or if you want to change your culture for one reason or another, making reductions with culture in mind could be an opportunity for you to take a step in that direction. Second area to consider when you're determining how to cut is cutting payroll associated with low performing products or services. And these are, dogs according to the BCG growth share matrix. And George is going to talk about that in a little bit. But the idea here is if that you're cutting an entire product line or a service line, then you can cut the payroll associated with the delivery of that product or service. So that's one big area where you can cut. We mentioned ground metrics, where both George and I experienced some pretty significant downturns in a short amount of time. Ground metrics was founded as a services company in the energy sector, and it was founded to use our patented technologies exclusively for services. So other companies couldn't buy or license our sensors, and if they wanted a particular set of data, they had to buy the services that we provided from ground metrics. So that was kind of the business model. And then calamity came. Oil prices crashed 75%. Our co-founder and CTO unexpectedly and tragically passed away. And so we had to scramble fast. We had built the organization with teams of people trained to provide the service. And we knew it wasn't maintainable. So at this point, our COO proposed the company exit the services business and become a pure tech company, meaning that we would just focus on licensing our technology instead of providing services. So providing those services had accounted for 2/3 of our staff. And, the remaining were technologists, some administrative staff. But this shift in going from a services organization to a technologist organization allowed us to make really deep cuts. And if we hadn't been open and thought creatively about the business model and been willing to make those big changes, we would have gone out of business. So this brings us to our third creative way to determine how to cut. Consider organizational restructures. If you have been contemplating a reorganization, then this might be a good time to do it. Sometimes a big concern we hear is with any kind of restructure is that they can be clunky. But in this crisis time, your customers are going to be more forgiving to delays, to dropped balls. So you can use this time to tap your entrepreneurial thinking and get your sea legs in your restructured organization. The fourth way to, considering how is looking at furloughs and other payroll reductions for individuals you want to retain. The key here is to know which areas of the business can slow down and then furlough those areas. So if you've got a critical line that can't slow, avoid furloughing in that area. And when you do so, make sure you support the people who are furloughed staff in applying for kind of state-sponsored unemployment insurance programs. Really be helpful in that regard so that your remaining staff who's furloughed is feeling supported. There are a number of creative ways to reduce payroll, but like the key is to know your staff, right size the communications, and really get it right for your team. So that brings us to the third step, and this I think is one of, if not the most critical step in the whole payroll reduction process, and it's communicating with compassion. It's really, really the key to building trust and morale amid a layoff. So you want to make sure you coordinate messaging and logistics in a way that allows the impacted employees to uphold their dignity. We know that reductions need to be well coordinated in a way to just keep your company safe from liability, but arguably as important, a well-coordinated and communicated layoff gives you the best shot at strengthening the trust with the employees who have not been laid off, and for providing an environment that upholds the dignity of each employee who is being impacted. Employees should not hear this about a layoff through the rumor mill. It should come directly from you or a trusted supervisor. You know, I know in some publicly traded and large companies, it isn't always possible. But if it is, you know, most of us are in below 50 employees. So if that's the case, I do highly recommend no pre-announcement. Announcing the layoff in advance leaves people to create their own story and anxiety. So, you know, imagine going 2 or 3 days knowing that there's a layoff and not knowing if you're going to be the one who's impacted. That creates a lot of anxiety, and that lasts even after the action's been taken. So change is really uncomfortable, and a layoff or reduction is a really big change. And so we always recommend announcing and conducting the layoff in a single day, because it accelerates that change curve. It shortens the time of discomfort and uncertainty. And this also reduces the opportunity for an unhappy employee to do any kind of damage to property or company reputation if it's all announced and happens in one day. When I've done sizable layoffs, it's been helpful to gather all of the impacted employees together, or, you know, in this current environment, it would be on the phone, to announce at one time. And that was counterintuitive for me when I first did it. But what we found is that it really does make the cut seem less personal. You know, it shifts it from targeting one person at a time to it being a very visible, widespread action. And so people take it less personally. And then a side benefit is that it can help contain any kind of outbursts of anger or frustration because you're in a group setting. So we do recommend doing it in a group meeting for the announcement to the impacted employees. And then after that group meeting is when we would meet with each impacted employee in a one-on-one setting to sign paperwork and you know, go through the documentation that you need to do from an HR compliance perspective. And these are more kind of private meetings where they have an opportunity to ask questions, have their reaction, and really get, you know, any kind of emotion processed through in a one-on-one setting. And then as you cycle through those, it gives others the opportunity to say goodbye, clean out their workspaces, etc. And then the other benefit with that kind of style of layoff is because everybody who has been laid off is already aware and already heard the announcement, the others in your office are not left to be wondering if they'll be next, which can be, like we've talked about, one of the most toxic things is that uncertainty of if there's another shoe that's going to drop. So that eliminates that for the employees who are not being laid off. But know that you know, the news is going to travel really quickly. So you're going to want to hold a series of follow-up meetings. First, I would say, if possible, you know, gather the non-impacted employees together to make a group announcement after the impacted employees have been notified. But at minimum, you know, an email can be sent to the remaining employees as soon as the impacted employees are told, and this allows you to communicate the news directly from the source. And afterwards, all supervisors should follow up with their reports individually to answer any of their questions, ensure their concerns are heard. And we're not talking just like a one-time meeting that you can check off the list. This needs to be a series of individual follow-ups over the coming weeks and months with the folks who are still at the company. And ideally, these are happening with more than one of the managers, you know, because different managers will pick up on different concerns from the same employee. And also, you know, time is our most valuable commodity. So it sends a message to the team that you really value them, that you're investing in them, and it shows an extra level of caring. And these check-ins should be 360 degrees. We're not just talking about how things are at work. You know, initially it's going to be very focused on the layoff, their questions, their concerns. But, you know, as you move on, they should be including things about how their families are doing, how they're feeling, how their continuing education is going. Make sure it's a holistic check-in. Another thing to remember, which kind of can help save relationships, is to make sure you're overtly communicating any kind of management pay reductions. You know, imagine here as an employee hearing that you're getting furloughed and a 10% reduction, but the person who is telling you also shares that they themselves are receiving a 20% reduction, and that the people at the top are receiving a 30% reduction. This makes bad news a lot more palatable, and it preserves morale. So all of these meetings, the group meetings, the individual follow-ups, should have coordinating talking points so that there's alignment on what's being communicated. This consistency builds trust. It also helps new managers who haven't been through this process before know what they can and can't communicate. So going back to the ground metric story, you know, we reimagined what the company structure would be like, and we knew we needed to reduce staff. And we knew that it was going to be a big cut. We also knew that the company was already reeling from the recent loss of our CTO. Every single person in the company had lost a friend, and the work atmosphere was stressful and sad. We had a bunch of technologists who were in high demand elsewhere, and we were at great risk of losing these key people. And so we needed them now more than ever, especially because our new model was depending on it. The great thing was that management knew their people. They considered what each person's biggest concerns would be and how best to engage them. We worked together with these considerations in mind to develop company-wide communications and the series of one-on-one check-ins. So we knew which employees would need to kind of think about things and marinate on things first. So we gave them more time before the one-on-one meetings. We knew which employees would be most concerned about financial security, so we spoke directly to that in their one-on-one. We knew who would need to see the vision of the new structure of the business to get excited and motivated, so that was something that was clearly communicated to those people. And we repeated it often. You know, the layoff is a big action, so there's a lot going on. People can only absorb so much information at one time. So the things that you want to stick with your employees, like the vision of the company and how this is we expect it to be a one-time action. Those really important points need to be repeated. So when we had company-wide meetings in the weeks following, we restated the new vision of the company. And this really helped both sides be honest, authentic, and transparent in the communications and in the meetings. So for ground metrics, we had a huge amount of adversity, but in large part because of how we handled these reductions and these shifts in our business, our retention rate was 2 times better than the industry. So this really speaks to the value of the communication and the thoughtful consideration of the impacted employees and the employees who remain. I think the next thing to really remember, and it's really important to know, is that you just changed the game and your employees know it. You've made a significant reduction. Maybe you've changed the business model or restructured significantly. Realize it, acknowledge it, repeat it. Layoffs are tough. They're hard for the people being laid off. They're hard for the people who remain. They're hard for management. But it's, we know that it's better to keep a critical mass of people employed, even if it's only partially employed or furloughed through the duration of a crisis, than keeping everybody employed for a little while and then having to let everyone go because you're shutting down. If you do it right, if you take culture into account, if you rethink how your organization is structured, if you're communicating with transparency and care, your people will realize that you were thoughtful and purposeful and that you seized the opportunity to build a stronger organization. Through that, now your key players, your key people who are there, know that you're not going to just survive the crisis, you're going to really gain a foothold. So with that, some more detail on how you're gaining that foothold and gaining strength, I'm going to give it back to George to provide more detail.
Thank you, Jessie. Letting people go, especially letting good people go, is one of the toughest aspects of our job. No matter how many times we do it, we may get a bit hardened to it, but it still sucks. And doing the communications in a coordinated, caring manner isn't just good for them, it's good for the people that are implementing it as well. Now, one of the benefits, though, of the post-production world is that it's easier to make big changes with a smaller, higher performing staff. Any changes, any significant changes, it's easier and faster to be able to make those changes with a smaller, higher performing staff. Not just to strengthen culture or reorganize structure, which is certainly true for those, but it's also holds true for improving your product line or your services offerings. And regardless of what you do, everything begins with good relationships. I mean, that's the foundation to a good business. So as we talk about building strength here, maintaining good relationships with all your employees, everybody else in your ecosystem, vendors, suppliers, service providers, customers, is critical. And when we're putting out fires and we're cramming 36 hours of work into 18-hour days, and we're tired ourselves and stressed, it's often easy to neglect having the extra conversations and tactfulness in those conversations and carving out the time to address things outside of business, engage how people are doing personally, how their families are doing and such. And this is the most important time to be doing those things. So make sure you're communicating in thoughtful ways, no matter how blown up you are in your business or even in your personal lives. This is what we need to do as leaders to grow excellent companies and to be good people ourselves. People will remember the hard times for a long time. Whether you handle things poorly or you handle them well, they will be remembered. Good, honest, respectful conversations, especially during hard times, even if it's tough news, can strengthen relationships. Even if somebody's getting bad news, if they receive it and they feel respected and they feel that it was thoughtful and that it makes sense, that will build relationship. And especially people that stay and come back together. And this is why the Army breaks people down and then builds them back up together in boot camp. Is the psychological effect of going through hard stuff together is powerful. Now, of course, we would never suggest you break anybody down, but people right now are at least stressed, if not breaking for reasons, numerous reasons, right? Or all the reasons aggregated together. Everyone is scared of something right now. So be sure to check in with people in ways that show you authentically care about them and their family. Do this multiple times and in different ways. And if you're not good at these sort of things, I used to be not really good at these sort of things, and just by forcing myself to do it, I've gotten better over time. But if you're not good at these sort of things, don't let that be an excuse. If you give an honest and authentic effort to people, then they'll see you're trying and that you care. Even if you kind of clunk through it, and even if it's kind of awkward, they'll see your intent, and they'll appreciate it, and they'll remember it. So everything starts with maintaining good relationships, and there's a lot of ways to do that. And communicating in these sorts of communications is just one of the most important ways to do it. Changing direction here a little bit, thinking about where you're making reductions. We caution you not to cut sales and marketing too deeply, if at all. Instead, if you're not selling and they're slow, can you find ways to repurpose them? Properly refocused, they could be instrumental in paving the path to coming out of this stronger. They're the people that are engaging with your customers and with other external parties. They could be focused on relationship building, research, and not the classic sense of research, but having conversations with your customers and prospective customers or areas you've thought about entering to try to understand where are other opportunities going to be. What are people's needs? What sort of things could you do to improve or add on to your products or services that you offer? If you're a services company, you can consider offering some pro bono hours for customers or other people in the community being impacted the most by the crisis. If you're a products company, you can help distressed people or companies by considering donations. You don't have to give away the farm to make a difference. Use your sales and marketing team to strategically build relationships while doing good for your customers and people in your ecosystem. And then use them to generate good press for your organization. Thirdly, here on this slide, address underlying issues. This is very much related to what Jessie was saying. But if you have a culture problem or an organizational structure issue or an underperforming product line, then this is a good time to fix those things. Not just through how you reduce, but then also how you build back coming out of it. So Jessie mentioned our definition of culture, and I'll repeat it here just because it's very important. It's the aggregate of each person's natural tendencies reinforced or multiplied by group dynamics, the workplace environment, communications, and leadership role modeling. And for this reason, replacing people that don't fit your culture with people who inherently embody your core values is the fastest way to change the culture. It's a big layoff that includes people that are not good culture fits, who are later replaced by people that do fit your culture naturally, will supercharge your company. It's also a time to restructure. If your organization's structure, processes, or workflow don't fit your current business, then this is a good time to reevaluate and make the changes. Often, our businesses evolve over time, but many of their underlying structures or systems or processes don't change much, if at all. If you're a production company, this might be a good time to update your product line or your product flow. If you're a services company, it might be a good time to reorganize how projects are managed or how they're sold. Can anything you're doing be automated? If you answer yes to any of these questions, this might be the time to reorganize your company accordingly. Regardless of what type of company or business you're in, it's probably been a long time since you've really evaluated all the key components for efficiency. You can probably improve efficiencies in one or more areas, and improved efficiencies will absolutely improve margins. Especially if you're a company where things are just kind of slowed down once you get through the cost reductions blitz. If it's just kind of a little slowed down, this is a good time to go and start thinking about what aspects of the business have you not thought about in a while. And those are good places to start digging into, to be looking for places to improve efficiencies. And to be interviewing people in your company, they may know them straight up without having to think much about it. So while you're making reductions here, this is a good time to also cut legacy products and services. You know, the 80-20 rule applies here. Often 80% of a company's profit is generated by 20% of its products or services. If you don't already know your breakdown, then this is a good time to figure that out first. Sometimes it's hard to cut underperforming products or services due to legacy reasons. Maybe they were the identity of your company for years or even decades. Maybe they are meaningful to you or the owner or the CEO for one reason or another. Maybe it's important to key customers that still demand them. I've heard all these reasons. And regardless, remember that what got you here won't get you there. It's time for you to evolve, because crisis accelerates evolution, and you will miss out on opportunities if you don't. If there's legacy reasons that have prohibited you from cutting an underperforming product or service line, then the reason this might be a good time to cut it is because customers and other key stakeholders will be more forgiving and understanding now to the changes you make to your business. So if you have customers that have been key customers that have demanded something you don't want to keep offering, they will be more accepting to you stopping offering that as part of your process of managing this crisis. What's the benefit of cutting them if they are profitable, right? I mean, I hear that a lot. Well, it's making money, right? People don't want to let go of things that are making money. Well, all of your products and services require time from your people, your key people, your management. The less time they spend on the lower performing areas means they have more time to put towards the higher performing areas. And you want to be growing your higher performing areas more than just maintaining your lower performing areas. So we couldn't recommend more strongly that you cut the dogs, preserve your cash cows, and launch stars in your product services mix. This is a BCG matrix that breaks it down. This image here, it's sort of self-intuitive, so for sake of time, I won't explain it all, but it's readily available on the internet, and there's lots of online sources that can walk you through it if you want to dig into that more deeply. This may be a good time to incubate and test drive a new product or service idea. If your staff is slow or is about to be kind of slow once they get through some adjustment period, this might be a good use of their time and could be a great morale boost. This would give them something else, maybe something exciting to think about and work towards. Downturns are a good time to offer free stuff. So this could be a good time to test drive a new product idea or service idea and then iterate it. And so because things may be a bit slow and because it's, you know, people are more accepting of free things, right, during these slow times, and you can get their attention more likely if they're on the slow end as well. Products and services born in recessions have stronger than average value propositions and thus have great growth potential during good times. And so this might be the opportunity for you to find your next winner. Adding on to that, many business leaders have product or service ideas that don't necessarily fit the company, but that would benefit the company. This might be a good time to spin that out as a different company or a subsidiary. Or it might be a good time to just start incubating that idea to spin it out later. This is what I get most excited about. I've successfully commercialized new products through spin-outs 2 times. Once was a university spin-out, and the other one spun out of a San Diego defense contractor. Other benefits to spinning companies out is they firewall liabilities and assets between entities. They're also a good way to avoid dilution in the mothership if additional capital is needed to commercialize the new product or service. The biggest benefit is probably focus. A one-product company has everyone focusing on that one product. And there's tremendous value in that for a lot of reasons. And I want to be conscientious of time, so I won't go into this. But please, if anybody needs to be convinced how important focus is, and in that regard, I mean focus in terms of having fewer products, even one product or service, then please bring it up in Q&A, and I'd be happy to see if I can convince you of the power of focus. The biggest benefit of allowing remote work is employee satisfaction. Now, a lot of people are going remote, and I know, I'm not going to talk about the obvious stuff, right? What you can save in rent and facilities and all of that. I'm going to talk about something that's a bit less obvious, and I think even more important. You don't need everyone to be remote, and people don't need to be remote all the time. But employees that want to work remotely, if they're able to work remotely, will have higher levels of job satisfaction. So how can you facilitate that? Think about the most important positions in your company and the positions that are the hardest to fill, especially when the labor market is tight. Do those people want to work from home just 1 or 2 days a week? Do they want to work from home more often? I mean, you know your people. And if you don't, then step number 1 is get to know your people. And if they want to work from home, are the systems that are and workflows and facility changes that you're putting in place now, can they be developed in a way that would accommodate some level of remote working ongoing later? Satisfied employees are more productive, positive, and creative. There's a ton of research out there that shows that companies with higher levels of employee satisfaction have higher levels of customer satisfaction. And it's not correlation, it's causation. There's good research that shows causation on this. And that is a triple win. We know this is a lot, and maybe only 1 or 2 of these things are applicable to your company. But we'd like to think that these are big ticket items. Cutting deep enough to survive is obviously a big deal. Supercharging culture is huge. Cutting dog products or service lines and launching new stars, those are big deals. Any one of these things could be transformative to your company as you emerge from this crisis. We would like to challenge you to challenge your own conventional wisdom, sacred cows, and underlying assumptions to identify your opportunity in this crisis. We're trying to help companies manage through this crisis with informational pieces like this webinar. You can find more info from us on these topics on our website, CaminoAlliance.com. There's a blog there. LinkedIn has them as well. We've posted a couple articles, and we'll be posting a couple more in the coming weeks. And so now we'd just like to open it up for Q&A to make sure we can answer as many of your questions as possible.
Yes, thank you so much, George and Jessie, for this information today. If anybody has any questions, please type them in the chat option or the Q&A. We can definitely answer those. We'll give everybody a minute to type those up. This was recorded, the webinar, so if you need to watch it or if you miss any part of it, it will be posted on events.bbcommunity.org. So let's give a quick glance at any questions out there. Okay, so I don't see any questions popping up. Thank you so much, George and Jessie, for taking time out of your busy day to present us this information. I hope everyone enjoyed it. If you do have any questions or think of any, please contact them, or you can share the question with me and I can forward it to them. Thank you everyone for attending today. Have a great weekend and please stay safe out there.